Hello EDUSPLORERs, thanks for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. If you are joining for the first time, I appreciate your time. If you really want to know that the geopolitical environment has shifted in North America and that Africa is paying very close attention, you do not have to go far. You just have to take a closer look with regards to the move that African nations are making at the moment. Someone will say, why do African countries do not push back with regards to the tariff? Not at all. That's not a strategy. You do not bring a knife in a gunfight. That's the reason why we see countries across the Sahel have asked their strategic partner for hundreds of years to leave that particular region. We saw the darling of the continent of Africa with regards to France's relationship have asked France to leave its territory in terms of military collaboration. More importantly, the darling of the United States of America to the continent of Africa, Kenya, have re-strategized its options and looking at China. More importantly, we see the country of Ethiopia breaking the mold and looking at other strategic partners in Southeast Asia. More importantly, the country of Egypt has reviewed its strategic engagement with the United States of America, has decided that it's better to deal with the devil you know than the angel you do not know. That's the reason why Egypt is re-strategizing the collaboration with the country of France. It is important at this time for Africa to understand that you are on your own. If you do not diversify your relationship, you will be stuck. All of this comes at a time when the United States of America is practicing protectionism and has cut off aid in terms of its own basic support that it provides the continent of Africa. As we've seen South Africa under tremendous pressure and building a relationship with the United States of America. However, all this did not come as a result of unknown situation. The countries across the region have come to realize if you do not break the status quo, you will be on your own, as Africa is experiencing tremendous growth in terms of its middle class and a burgeoning population. The continent cannot sit regards to its growth and development. That's the reason why these warnings came at a time when one of Africa's leading economics experts who have worked in Goldman Sachs and other international organizations warned the continent of Africa 15 years ago that this moment will come. Without any hesitation, she went ahead and said this.
Moyo argues aid is not a solution, it's the problem.
I don't agree with the message. Fundamentally, I don't think Africa needs more aid. I think it needs less aid. It needs governments to be made accountable to the domestic citizenry and not accountable to donors. Africans stand in the hot African sun to elect their leaders. And it's those leaders who are charged with the responsibility of delivering social services and being accountable to their people. There clearly was a vacuum that has allowed the celebrity culture to seep in, but it would seem to me that no society would appreciate their whole policy and the future of their children to be dependent on celebrities that actually don't live in these contexts. Basically, aid has become an industry. There are just way too many vested interests, and by and large, the criticisms that my book has been receiving are coming from those quarters, people who actually have a vested interest to see the continuous cycle of Africa in despair so that they can justify their existence.
What sort of people are you talking about?
I'm talking about academics, I'm talking about people from the NGO community, I'm talking about people who are policymakers and politicians who know that it doesn't work. The evidence has shown it doesn't work. In 1970, 10% of Africans lived in poverty. It's now more like 70%. In many countries, as high as 85% of Africans are living in poverty at a time when the aid model has become so dominant.
What's the solution?
In the book, I actually prescribe that they should, with immediate effect, or in the very near foreseeable future, implement a 5-year plan where they systematically reduce aid to these countries. I would say that things like the capital markets are an easy way for countries to start to fund themselves. So, in the worst case scenario, governments in Africa should focus on getting ratings. They should be focusing on learning how to pitch to international investors so that when the markets do come back, which they invariably will, they'll be ready to raise money in the capital markets. But on the other hand, right now there are non-traditional markets such as China and the Middle East where money does exist, and African governments should be talking to these places about issuing bonds and raising capital that way.
In the course of this strategic move, we've seen the country of Kenya that moved to the United States of America to re-strategize its relationship and build partnership. However, Kenya has come to understand the United States of America might leave them on the road, and that's the reason why they have moved very close to the country of China to re-engage, to re-strategize, to re-energize their relationship, talking about debt and refinancing and a whole lot of other very important things, because at the moment they have realized that the United States of America may not hold their back.
William Ruto touched down in Beijing on Tuesday, kicking off a 5-day visit aimed at deepening Kenya's growing ties with China. Since 2013, Beijing has poured billions into Kenyan infrastructure, reshaping its economic landscape. Now Ruto is turning that partnership into political momentum, pushing not only for deeper cooperation, but also for a permanent African seat on the UN Security Council. The visit also signals Kenya's shifting focus away from the West and towards China's rising global influence. Olivia Bizo reports.
On Tuesday, Kenya's President William Ruto arrived in Beijing for talks aimed at increasing investment and trade. China is already Kenya's biggest lender. They've funded massive road, railway and power projects. Ruto is hoping to expand that partnership, especially in the manufacturing and digital infrastructure sectors. But this trip is not just about business. Ruto is also hoping to push for Africa's permanent seat at the UN Security Council. He says that the current system is outdated and that Africa deserves a stronger voice in global decision-making. China has said that it supports reform, so Ruto is hoping to turn that support into action. While this trip does suggest a tilt towards Beijing, Ruto definitely emphasised that he is not taking sides. In a speech that he gave this Wednesday, he says that Kenya is neither facing east or west, but it's facing forwards. He also emphasised that he wants Kenya to serve as a bridge between East and West. Relations with the US do still remain strong, but it looks like Ruto will increasingly be prioritising his relations with Beijing as investments do come a lot faster and there's a lot less political instability, especially since US President Donald Trump came to power. So overall, this trip will be an opportunity for President Ruto to bring home some deals and definitely boost his image as a continental leader.
Now, China and Kenya say they've upgraded ties to a new level after a meeting between President Xi Jinping and William Ruto in Beijing. In a joint statement, the leaders said they were committed to global stability in the face of widespread economic uncertainty because of US tariffs. Ruto is on a 5-day state visit to China, his third trip to the country since taking office in 2022. And China is Kenya's biggest lender.
Talking about diversification, the country of Ethiopia has also looked inward and looked externally and go back to those partners that it felt has something more to offer than relying on strategic partners that do not provide you those particular guidance. As we see, China has also built a relationship across the south part of the continent of Asia. Ethiopia, a member of BRICS, have looked at its particular relationship with China and more importantly building on those old connections, engaging Vietnam to look what happens.
Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh chaired an official welcome ceremony at the Presidential Palace in Hanoi on April 15th afternoon for Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali and his spouse, who are on an official visit to Vietnam, where he will also attend the 4th Partnership for Green Growth and the Global Goals Summit from April 14th to 17th. This is the first visit to Vietnam by a senior Ethiopian leader since the two countries established diplomatic relations in 1976, and also the first high-level delegation exchange between the two countries in 7 years. The Ethiopian Prime Minister's visit to Vietnam takes place in the context that the two countries are looking forward to celebrating the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations in 2026. After half a century, the traditional friendship between Vietnam and Ethiopia has developed well. The Communist Party of Vietnam has a good relationship with the ruling Prosperity Party of Ethiopia. Ethiopia has recognized Vietnam's market economy since 2014. The two sides regularly support each other at multilateral forums and international organizations. The Ethiopian Prime Minister's visit clearly demonstrates the strategic vision and desire of the two countries to elevate and deepen bilateral relations in the new development stage. After the welcome ceremony, the prime ministers visited a photo exhibition on the two countries, their people and good relations between Vietnam and Ethiopia, which was jointly organized by the government office and the Vietnam News Agency. The two leaders then held talks.
These are critical times in African history, and the continent of Africa will move swiftly to survive. Because if you do not do that, you will pay the price, regards to your economic degradation and affecting your growth and export and import in a number of areas. Your manufacturing industries, your export markets will be impacted. That's the reason why Egypt, of all, that came under tremendous pressure from the United States of America. We saw experts across the continent of Africa, specifically in Egypt, are coming out clear and revitalizing their relationship and reviewing that option and move ahead to say things like this.
As Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli hinted at an economic policy shift away from the US.
This is an all-out trade war. We are witnessing a new era. All the trade principles that we have known for decades are being destroyed. We have to focus on merging with a wider range of trading partners. It's very important to join different alliances, to bond with strong and loyal partners in the next period.
Egypt has not given up. It's looking for other partners, irrespective of your position in regards to these particular partners. Like I pointed out, it is important to deal with someone that you know than someone that you do not know. That's the extent that Egypt has taken it at this particular stage, talking about France.
Cairo is in talks with the US to review the 10% tariff slammed by President Donald Trump. According to the Egyptian government, bilateral trade in 2024 stands at about $8.6 billion. Nearly $6.1 billion is U.S. exports to Egypt, with a 36% increase year-on-year, against $1.8 billion Egyptian exports to the U.S., mainly in textiles and ready-made garments.
The direct trade impact is minimal on Egypt compared to other countries. The textile industry will be affected, but negotiations are underway to protect this industry. The fear, however, is that the high U.S. tariffs on other countries will lead to global inflation, which means our imports of basic commodities, food and energy, will be more expensive and pose real threats on our stricken economy.
The Suez Canal revenue, a major source of hard currency, can also be negatively affected if the US tariffs leads to a slowdown in global trade. Trump's actions have caused anxiety in Cairo, as Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli hinted at an economic policy shift away from the US.
This is an all-out trade war. We are witnessing a new era. All the trade principles that we have known for decades are being destroyed. We have to focus on merging with a wider range of trading partners. It's very important to join different alliances, to bond with strong and loyal partners in the next period.
A flurry of activity followed the statement. In Cairo, Egypt signed $8 billion worth of investment deals with France, which had earlier called on the EU to detach itself from the US. Also, a Gulf tour by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi saw an influx of up to $70 billion in new investments from Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Meanwhile, the business community here believes the US tariffs could actually be an opportunity for Cairo to lure in foreign firms seeking to relocate to low-duty states like Egypt.
Egypt is well equipped. We have the infrastructure, we have the cheap skilled labor, we have a logistical location. Egypt can be a hub. We also have free trade and zero tariff agreements with about 120 countries, including in the Middle East and in Africa like the COMESA, which will guarantee free access to all these markets, not just the US, for manufacturers in Egypt.
And the Prime Minister has doubled down on this idea.
International reports say there are countries that could benefit from these challenges, and one of them is Egypt. In these circumstances, we will continue to support our industries and will provide all possible incentives for localization and to attract foreign direct investments.
The government also announced that it will form an economic team dedicated to the sole purpose of achieving that goal. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo, Egypt.
However, it is important to note that at this stage of the continent of Africa's history, it is important for them to continue to work with partners that provide them more options than those that to an extent could leave them on the road. That's the reason why Ethiopia, Kenya, including the country of Egypt, have decided that it is about time to look for something more, to diversify and look beyond what we see at the moment. Let me know in the comment section what you think regards the strategic relationship between these countries and why the United States of America should rethink its tariff policy, and more importantly think that at this time the US is invisible is not true. However, we have seen how China have stood up the United States of America, and the country of South Africa is building its relationship again with the country of the United States of America. We all shall be monitoring that very closely at how Africa is looking for new options. For now, I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.